Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to the Other Side of Success podcast. My name is Tyler Rutledge, and I am your host. Before we get into today's episode, please let me thank my sponsors. Starting out with Farmhouse Fitness, which is Birmingham's home for results-driven functional training, movement with purpose. I love what this gym does for me, both mentally and physically. And Killcliff Clean Energy Drinks for people who train hard and live bold. And for this season, I'm happy to be a Capital One ambassador. I love what the Spark Capital One card does for myself and my family and allowing us to travel and use our points flexibly. So check them out at the links in my bio, please. Well, listen, you guys, today's guest is just amazing. It's someone that I'm honored to call both a friend and my personal financial advisor, Arthur Strauss. Arthur is the president and CEO of Strauss Financial Group, a family-founded firm in Birmingham and serving clients since 1988. A Samford University graduate and former Bulldog baseball pitcher, Arthur's competitive drive now fuels his work as a certified financial planner, guiding clients through investments, retirement, and legacy planning. His story is one of overcoming setbacks, from a career-altering shoulder surgery in high school to battling Hodgkin's lymphoma in the prime of his life. Arthur's journey is defined by resilience, faith, and an unwavering commitment to living life the right way, both personally and professionally. Arthur, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tyler. It's always a little strange to hear your own bio, but I appreciate it, and thanks for having me. Excited to have a conversation with you today.
Man, absolutely. And that's something that I always ask people. So when you hear that bio, what goes through your head?
It's kind of surreal. You feel young in your mid 30s, but you can also look back and say, wow, there's been a lot of accomplishments along the way, a lot of ups and downs, some which we'll get into detail about
Yeah.
today. But it's pretty cool. I feel like sometimes we're going pretty fast in our lives, and it's okay sometimes to slow it down and look back and kind of think about the things you've accomplished and be proud of those.
I couldn't agree more, man. I think it would probably do us all good to recognize our own achievements a little bit more often and do some reflective thinking about, you know what, I am worthy and I have worked hard and I'm glad to be able to have these things. What a gift, right?
Absolutely. It's a blessing.
Well, listen, man, I'm excited about today. I've been fortunate enough to be with you through this entire process that you've had, most recently with your cancer diagnosis and now remission that we'll get into. So there's still things that I don't know that I'm excited to dig into today. But I want to go back to the very beginning first, because like everybody, there was a foundation that was set that allowed you to kind of have the things that were instilled in you that gave you the ability to get through all of this. So take me back growing up in a family that was really deeply rooted in finance and faith and serving customers. I mean, man, it's something you've been in your whole life.
It has. It has. I don't think there's a lot of young kids that are sitting at the dinner table, hearing about the stock market. My parents were financial advisors and broke away from kind of the rat race of corporate world and opened up their own practice about the time that my older sister was born, in the midst of raising actual babies and then this new baby, their business. I think some of that entrepreneurial spirit passed on pretty honestly to my sister and I. She owns her own therapy business. I own two businesses. So, we got to grow up in a family that was business owners and got to see the benefits of that. But ultimately, the focus as a family was family first. And, that's
Yeah.
something my parents, kind of instilled with us and led by example that, our careers are very important. Taking care of your clients is a huge priority, but ultimately, families are number one. And
Yeah.
we were close and we got to grow up in that setting and see that, day by day, which I'm trying to carry on now as a father myself. So like I said, you don't have many 12-year-olds getting to hear about the dot-com
Yeah.
bubble, but, getting to learn and see these things from a young age was really neat.
Yeah. I mean, goodness gracious, going back to 1988, there's been a whole lot of things within the stock market that have been great and bad. And you've seen them from the insider's perspective, not just an
That's
investor's
right.
perspective.
That's right.
Well, So I kind of love the lessons there that your parents instilled in you early. And as somebody who obviously uses your services and familiar with your firm and the people that work there, I can see that family culture shifting over into your business. Was that something that, when your parents were running the business, was that the same, or is that something that you implemented?
That's definitely something that was passed down through them. Like I said, they were founders of Strauss Financial and started this with 0 clients, $0 under management. And so you would think that there's this work ethic to get to this point. And,
Mm,
what I got to see was we're going to work really, really hard to grow this business and be there for our kids and family. And that's a tough balancing act. When you're a new business and you're trying to grow and put food on the table all the while, my parents never missing a single game, a single activity, that's tough. So I got to see, that work ethic from a very young age. Both my sister and I were in competitive sports. A lot of weekends we were separate, where they were at a soccer tournament with her, and someone was at a baseball tournament with me. Getting us to our activities, getting us to bed, and then work until 11 or 12 o'clock at night to
right.
grow this business.
Mm,
I mean, that's a sacrifice. That's a grind that I got to see that, I've tried to carry over now.
yeah.
The other thing that sticks out to me is bringing on these new clients, trying to grow this business. One of the very first things they ever told their clients was, our family is going to be our number one priority, and we're going to take great care of you. You are so important to us. We care so much about your success, but we're going to prioritize our family. And that's something I've tried to carry on. And, you think almost I'm going to lose business, kind of saying that, but honestly, it was the opposite reaction. People respected that. And knew my parents had the right values in place. And ultimately, business is about, doing business with people that you trust. And, you can get behind someone who has the right ethics in
Right.
place.
So now that we kind of have an idea of the foundation here, you were clearly gifted at an early age in baseball. Take us through that. You played growing up, like you said, competitive travel ball. We know that you played at Sanford, but there was a moment that kind of shaped your baseball career, and it was an injury in high school. Take us back through that process and kind of what was going through your mind then.
Yeah, I think, for me, baseball was my identity.
Mm,
As a young kid, as you said, I was pretty gifted in it, and realized pretty early on, I'm decent at this sport. I can throw a ball pretty
yeah.
hard. So I ended up at 12 years old playing on a travel team out of Huntsville. We were born and raised in Birmingham, and my dad would drive me 2 nights a week after middle school to practice in Huntsville. We played on a competitive team that traveled all over the country. And coming into high school, that was my plan. That was my career in my mindset. I was at a point, about 16 years old, coming in my sophomore season, where letters were flowing in the mail. I mean, every big program from Clemson to Florida State, Florida, Arizona State. I mean, the writing was on the wall that I was going to get to go play big D1 baseball. Kind of the pinnacle was Christmas time of my sophomore season. My dad walks over holding a letter with a smirk on his face. I said, "Well, this is different. We've gotten a bunch this fall. What's this one?" And it was a Merry Christmas from the New York Yankees.
Wow.
So I'm sitting here as a 16-year-old, sky's the limit. I'm
Yeah.
about to, take over the world here. Getting ready for my sophomore season, I started getting some arm discomfort. Throwing was getting to be pretty painful.
Mm,
And it hit me one morning right before the season started. I was getting dressed for school, and I bent over to pull my jeans up and realized I can't lift my arm up.
mm,
It is so painful that I can't even pull my jeans up. And so I went downstairs and said, "Mom, Dad, we need to go see a doctor. There's something going on with my arm," and get the MRI. And luckily, we're blessed in Birmingham to have excellent,
right.
access to some of the best doctors in the world. And I go see Dr. Lee Mack, and we take a look at the MRI, and he looks at me and said, "Arthur, we got some bad news. You have a 93% labrum tear off the bone, and your bicep tendon that connects into your shoulder is severed."
Mm,
So that was pretty tough, but I didn't really know what that meant. And I said, "Well, what does this mean for my baseball career?" And he looks at me, and I appreciate the honesty, but it definitely lit a fire in me. He says, "You're probably never going to be able to pitch again.
mm,
It's that damage that we're going to do our best to repair it, with the hopes of maybe you can play in the outfield again. But pitching, you got less than 5% chance of this arm being able to handle that again.
Wow.
You can imagine, right? Just the frustration, the anger, the why me moments,
Mm.
right? Going through my head
Yeah.
of, this is who I am, this is who people know me as. Um, and now you're telling me that essentially this dream that I've had since I was, 5 years old is gone. And that was the first true mental just test as a person that I had to go through
Mm.
uh, to say, I respect your opinion, Dr. Lee Mack, but I'm just not going to let that happen,
Mm.
right? And you kind of had to turn this mindset on of first off, I hate being told what to do, and for someone to say, "Hey, this isn't going to happen," that really lit a fire in me
Right.
to prove them wrong. And it was a very long journey. I mean, it was a good 18 months of rehab and strengthening and trying to throw again. My life has changed a lot from that moment.
Right.
All the scholarship offers went away. All the chance of playing professionally after high school went away. But I still did get one scholarship, and that was to Samford University here in Birmingham. And guess what that scholarship was for? Pitching. So it was a very hard 2 years to get through that
Mm.
and to process that more mentally than physically.
Yeah.
But, I did get through it, and, that was a lot of help through family and faith and hard work,
Yeah.
and got to pitch at a D1 level.
Man, I sit there and think about it, and so many people. It's interesting how many people had setbacks early in life. That 14 through 18 that kind of shaped who they became later in life, and that's certainly my personal story. When you're sitting there and you're 16 years old and you've got all these D1 scholarship offers coming in, letters from the New York Yankees, right? And like you said, you're sitting on top of the world. Everybody knows Arthur is this guy's going to play in the big leagues. Like, I almost feel like you're underselling that. Like, what was the pain like knowing that D1, like at the highest level, was getting ripped out from under you? There's no more Christmas cards coming from anybody in the big leagues. Like, what was that like? Were you able to focus on that then, or was that something that you didn't even realize that was creating trauma until later in life?
I mean, it was brutal, to be honest. It was devastating, but also, I'm someone that occurred, I really went into this kind of battle mindset of, it's not over until it's over, right?
Right.
And until there are no options for me to play, I'm going to prove them wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Just plain and simple, right? So I mean, there is a period of sadness and anger and frustration, but then at a certain point, you just gotta buckle down.
Yeah.
You can sit in self pity, or you can do something about it. And I'm not saying I was perfect in that. There was a lot of moments and nights, kind of sitting there thinking everything I've worked for is gone,
Yeah. Of course.
and you're at a very immature age to understand that there's a lot more to life than baseball.
Yes.
But you don't think about that at the time as a
No.
16-year-old, and so it was tough. But as you alluded to, it shaped me for a much bigger obstacle that I would face later on in life. So, I do kind of look at it as something that, maybe prepared me for something that was coming.
So, and that is an amazing segue because that's exactly where I was headed. So, we've got this foundation. You experienced a pretty, at least mentally and physically, which at the time felt catastrophic setback, right? Here we are. You're in the prime of your life. You've got three kids, one very brand new child, I believe. You're married, running an incredibly successful business. I'm pretty sure you had just built a house and you get a diagnosis and you've got Hodgkin's lymphoma. That doesn't happen to healthy people. It doesn't happen to people in their mid 30s, right? These are the things we tell ourselves. What was that like? Walk us through that, please.
Yeah, I'll back up just a little bit. So I met my wife at Sanford. I got a degree in entrepreneurship. I knew I wanted to run a business, wasn't sure, what I wanted to do, and ended up coming into finance.
Mm.
So to kind of catch us up, that before that year of the diagnosis, I had taken over, I bought my parents out into the end of 2020. So started 2021, run the business by myself. Things were going well. 2022 was kind of a rough year. So I don't know if you remember, but the stock market had an ugly year.
Yeah.
I'm 2 years into this thing, and market's down 25%. Now all the clients are looking at me. I'm, solo and responsible for 200 families' wealth. And, we were expecting our third child. So I was happy when the calendar, kind of turned from 2022 into 23.
Mhm.
I felt the market was going to improve. We were about to have our third daughter. I was pretty optimistic about things. And like you said, our daughter was born January 19th. And that previous fall, with two young kids and Mother's Day out, we had COVID, we had RSV.
Yep.
The whole family was sick all fall long. I mean, we were all coughing, right? Except for everyone's cough went away eventually, except for mine. I was also experiencing some upper back pain and had tried to go to physical therapy and did some dry needling for it. And we just couldn't really get that fixed for some reason. So we said, let's get to the new year. Let's get through Everly's birth. Let's get home, get settled as a family, and then we'll kind of figure out what's going on. And my wife, thank God she saved my life, and her background is a nurse practitioner in internal medicine. So she's, obviously very bright in the healthcare field. We knew something was off, but the priority was just first off, getting our three kids home safe and sound from the
Right.
hospital.
Yep.
My youngest was in the NICU for a few days. My wife Holly had to have a C-section and a hernia repair surgery. So this is 12 days later from her birth, we're home and now, we're kind of settled in. She says, I have an appointment with you. I want you to go see this doctor. We're going to get your chest x-ray and kind of take a look at things. And I'll never forget that day, Tyler. I mean, I remember every detail
Yeah.
about that whole day as clear as could be. We went in and we got an x-ray. And, the thought process was, I remember leaving that morning saying to Holly, gosh, I hope this isn't pneumonia. What I would have done to have it be pneumonia come back.
Golly.
But I get an x-ray and I go back to work. About 2 hours later, it's Holly calling me and I can hear some fear in her voice. And she says, Arthur, they found quite a large mass on the x-ray. You need to go right now back to the hospital. We're going to get a CT scan done and see what's going on. So I leave the office right away, drive to the hospital, get in the CT machine and get home about 2 hours later. And we have the results. I'm looking at a laptop with my wife, and the findings are about a 4.5 inch mass in my chest cavity, with the findings being most likely lymphoma or thymoma, or, and this was kind of the scary part for us, or broad interpretations, which means we think it's this, but this could be anything.
Hmm.
We also didn't know the specific location at the time. I wasn't sure if this tumor was actually in my lungs or if it was on the outside. So obviously the immediate reaction is utter shock,
Yeah.
fear, and you're terrified. You're
Sure.
terrified. Having my family came over that night. My sister and brother-in-law took my kids out for dinner so I could focus on what was going on. And yeah, we had our world utterly rocked, shaken, whatever word you want to use, all in one day. I mean, it was a moment of feeling that is really hard to describe.
I just can't. And it's crazy. We've got mutual friends, and I just remember when I found out, I was just like, what? Like it just never registered for me that, and I want to hear more about this, but when you don't know what to think about something, sometimes you kind of just say awkward things. And I remember looking at Allie and saying, we put our money with Arthur because he was our age, and I was like, I want my financial advisor to grow with me and my money. And I was like, I looked at her and I said, that was the most selfish and horrible thing to say, but like, I didn't really know what to say, you know?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
because it just blew my mind. And then there was this like, and I want to hear about it from your perspective, but I remember just the sadness that I felt for you and for Holly, and knowing that these folks have, beautiful family, and not that we expected the worst by any chance, but just, this is crazy. This is going to be so disruptive. And so that's kind of what I want to know from you is like, when you get this diagnosis, like you laid the background so perfect for us, you've just taken over this business, brand new baby, two other kids, happily married, you got a brand new house, like all these great things in your life are going on. How did that disrupt your personal and your professional rhythm?
For the first little bit, I would say it was very disruptive. The hard part was there was about a 10-day period post that CT scan where I thought I was going to die,
Yeah.
to be honest. We couldn't figure out. I had to get a needle biopsy where I'm awake and they're sticking this huge needle into my chest to get a biopsy of it. But the tumor itself was so big that they couldn't get an accurate reading. So I had to be scheduled for a surgical biopsy where they actually cut through my pec muscle to take a good chunk of it out. And that was 12 days after. So I still don't know, is this in my lungs? What type of cancer this is? How much is it spread? How aggressive it is? All these things are running through my head. Of course, you do the thing you're not supposed to, which is Dr. Google, and that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Don't ever get on the internet. So there was this week and a half period where, yeah, I was thinking about, have I set my family up for success if something were to happen to me? Are they going to be okay? How is Holly going to take, care of these three children if I die? I mean, all these just thoughts running through my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and, kind of fast forward, we ended up figuring out what it was. Luckily, one of the specialists for this type of cancer in the country is here in Birmingham, which is a huge blessing.
Yeah, for sure.
So I get in with my oncologist. We get a game plan. Probably the low point of it all was the surgical biopsy cutting through my chest. Well, at the same time, they had to put a port in my other chest where they were going to be able to hook up the medicine for chemo. Well, I had already started losing a good bit of weight and just hadn't really noticed it. So I was pretty thin in my upper chest. So they really cut through both of my pec muscles
Mm.
during this surgery. And I just remember coming out of that and not even being able to lift my chest, my torso up for a week without extreme pain. I typically am in the mid 175-pound range, and I get on a scale, 158, 157.
Mm.
My clothes are swallowing me. And there's just this thought process of what is happening. I mean, I was like you, just in shock. Like,
Yeah.
is this real life? But the mindset going into my first chemo really shifted for me. So I had every 2 weeks for 6 months. And going into that first one was where it was funny. I'm facing this life or death thing, but I thought back to the mindset I had with my shoulder, right? Which is, okay, you've had your time to be sad, to be angry,
Hmm.
but it's time now. It's time to go to work. And that's how I viewed it. I thought of my chemo as a battle that I was going to face, and mentally I was not going to lose that mentally. And easier said than done, obviously, right?
Of course.
Physically it really took its toll on me, but mentally that's the part I could control, and I wasn't going to let it control me for 6 months of my life.
Yeah.
So having the support of my wife, of my family, my brother-in-law and sister, my parents, my mother-in-law was a saint. She flew in from Canada every other chemo session to help take care of the kids. I mean, the support from my clients, from community was just unbelievable. I mean, it was truly special to kind of get to see that, that love pour in.
When you're going through that and okay, so as a leader, as a strong man leading your family, leading a business, a Division 1 baseball player, was it difficult for you to allow people into that just vulnerable side of your life and allow people to love on you and take care of you? Or did that create more fear and uncertainty? Like, I don't want, all these meals and for people to be sad and, ask me how I'm doing all the time. Like, what was going on mentally then?
It was tough at first because, yeah, you do almost feel this sense of helplessness,
Mhm.
of worthlessness, right? But ultimately, until you've gone through chemo and you feel, I had it on Thursdays. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 days straight, I was pretty much in bed. I mean, it was that taxing that you get to a point where you feel so tired, so lousy that I reached a point where I was like, help is okay, you know?
Yeah, of course.
Um, and when I do feel better, when I do kind of come out of this cycle that I was in every 2 weeks, I'm gonna do everything I can for my family. I'm gonna be an active father. I'm gonna be a great husband. I'm gonna be there for my clients. Some things I prided myself on was I said, okay, I know I'm gonna miss every 2 weeks, Thursday, Friday at work, but I will be back every chemo session that following Monday. I'm gonna stick to that. And I did. And then I also told myself, every 2 weeks, somewhere in there, find a day where you can work out.
Okay.
You're going to work out one time between each session. And those are the the things I kind of had to, that gave me that feeling of I am still accomplishing some
Yeah.
things, right? But at the same time, understanding I know I need a world of support and help.
So tell me about the importance during this situation, the importance of that structure, the getting to work on Mondays, making sure you hit that. That's discipline, right? And I think through all these episodes, I'm learning that these people who have experienced significant setbacks in life, whether it's addiction, physical, mental, whatever it is like eventually there became discipline. Tell me about that. Why was that so important for you?
I like to be in control. I like to be in control of my schedule. I'm a creature of habit. I like my routine. And obviously, that was all shaken. Right. And so, with this diagnosis, the thing that I couldn't control was my body.
Right.
I lost weight. I lost hair. I had blisters in my mouth, stomach pain, horrible leg pain, all that. My body was just deteriorating in front of my eyes, and there was nothing that I could do about it. So, what could I control was my mindset,
Wow.
my schedule, taking care of my family, my clients. So I was really just kind of grasping for things that were normal,
Oh
a
man.
sense of normal. I knew I had a very long battle ahead. I mean, 6 months is a long time to be going through chemo, but how could I have a sense of normal through it all?
Mm,
And obviously for me, but also for my wife and kids and my employees, right? Like there's going to be disruption. There's no way around it
right.
to my life and to my schedule. But when I can, I'm going to do everything in my power to have a sense of normalcy for everyone else around me. And that really helped me be able to get through that just by, kind of the thing I kept telling myself. I even got one of those, silicone bracelets I put on my wrist was one day at a time.
Mm,
That was kind of my mindset. My mission statement personally was just one day at a time. I'm going to get up today. I have things that I'm going to accomplish no matter what. I'm not going to bed until they're done. And I'm going to rest. I'm going to let my body heal.
mm.
I'm going to get up tomorrow and try to do it again. So just taking it one day at a time.
How did this impact, obviously I saw, during this time period, Holly posted on Facebook and, updating people, but what was the toll on Holly and the girls?
I'll start with Holly. She was an absolute just warrior.
Hmm.
If you remember, I said we had our third child who was 12 days old, and Holly had just had two surgeries where she was on a 6-week recovery plan herself.
Right.
Well, guess what got forgotten, or not forgotten, but pushed to the side
Her recovery.
was her health and her recovery. And there was a lot of tough nights for her where I wasn't as helpful with our third as I was the first two with the night feedings and the changing and, post those two surgeries, I couldn't even lift my newborn baby for over a month, so she had to take the brunt of that on and all the while have a sick husband
Mm,
who she loves and has the same fears of if am I about to lose him or what is this going to look like? So it was, kind of a single mom on
yeah.
those chemo weekends with three young kids or very high energy and also caring for a husband, right? So, I mean, bringing us closer, bringing our relationship to the next level is an understatement. You say in your wedding vows through sickness and health. Well, I'm very blessed that my wife stuck by the
Yeah.
sickness and health part, man. She carried our family. She really did,
Mm,
and that's something, I'll never be able to repay her for because it was a challenge. For my girls, luckily they were, younger. My oldest was 5 during this, so she understands.
mhm,
My middle was 3. For them, I think the day-to-day was tough
mhm.
because on those chemo weekends, how do you tell a 3 and a 5-year-old that dad, who you've always seen, running around, taking you to sporting events, he needs to nap today?
Mm,
Or how do you have the physical appearance change for a 3 and a 5-year-old? And they're looking at their dad who's now bald, who's lost, his eyebrows and eyelashes. And, for them, I tried to make it lighthearted.
yeah, of course.
Right, we tried to have fun with it.
Yeah.
I would go out on the deck and let them shave my head in a funny way was as hair was falling out. My port in my chest is this big, like, protruding bump, so we always pretended that that was my robot button
Oh man.
that would turn me into a robot, right? So we had to have fun with it.
Yeah.
But ultimately knew, whether they knew consciously or not, I knew they were learning from this experience
Mhm.
and that they were seeing firsthand as young kids that life is not always going to be perfect.
Right.
Sometimes you're going to get dealt a bad hand. And I wanted them to see their dad deal with that in a way that as adults they might, be able to look back and kind of think on that and, be proud of that.
I admire that attitude and the ability to take that situation and turn it into what you did and how you handled yourself. Were there moments though where you did lose it and you were just, did you ever have a moment where you were just like completely and utterly distraught?
There was a few.
Mhm.
There was a few for sure. One of those I kind of mentioned after that, the dual surgery and going to work. I remember getting dressed and walking out of our bedroom, and I just had this sense of I'm going to do something today. I'm going to go to work this first Monday after chemo, and I just remember Holly looking up at me from across the room and seeing how skinny and sick I already looked.
Mhm.
And this was the beginning of 6 months, and her kind of breaking down. That was really tough. The other moment that sticks out to me, and there was a lot.
Right.
There was a lot through the process. But one that sticks out was actually not distraught, but it's where I finally let all the emotion come out. And it was actually on the very last day of chemo. And so you get to ring the bell, and then my family surprised me at the hospital with balloons. I had all these amazing people reaching out. Congratulations, you got through it. So that was this more upbeat, celebratory feeling.
Mhm.
But inside, I was exhausted.
Mhm.
I had mentally been dealing with this, like I said, this kind of mindset shift for 6 months of battling this thing. And when it was finally over, I got home and I just sat down on my couch, and my at the time 5 year old Addison walked over to me, and she was the only one who had a different tone. She looked at me very seriously, looked me dead in the eye, and just said, "Dad, I'm so proud of you.
Mm.
I know how hard these last 6 months have been, and you did it." And then just hug me. Talk about waterworks, man. I mean, it was,
That's got me going
game
right now.
over. Because it was, yes, I was so happy that
Mm.
I'd gotten through that, but just it all just kind of came
Yeah.
out in that moment of, being able finally to turn that mindset off and getting my 5 year old showing this understanding and love, and to say, okay, like I just said, I was trying to do this in a way that my girls would be proud of, and for her to notice that as 5 years old was one of the most significant moments
Yeah.
for me.
Man, kids will get you.
Gosh.
Their honesty, their how present they are, in their surroundings, and I think there's a lesson there, right? Is we're so distracted as adults that, at least for me, I'm preaching to me right now. Is I'm so distracted that Lucy and Jack, they'll pick up on things that I don't even realize, and I'm like, how do they do that? How do they remember these things? And it's because they're so present.
Always listening,
They're just
always
always
listening,
listening and picking up on stuff, and
processing.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I mean,
yeah.
I think it's there's 2 sides of this. One, it's gonna teach your children how to be resilient themselves, but I think also it's good for our kids to see us and good for us to be okay not being okay,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah,
I think that's hard as business owners, leaders, family members, the man of the house, that, these are all labels that are kind of put on us. And it's like, don't show emotion, be callous, and, just go to work and perform. Right.
exactly. Yeah.
So we talked about, we got to that moment, right? You finished your chemo. What was life like moving on from there? So you finished chemo. At what point were you going back for more scans? And what was that waiting period of like, okay, yeah, I'm done with chemo, but that doesn't mean I'm cancer free.
Yeah, yeah, and so I'll rewind a little bit. In May, so we're about halfway through treatment, we were able to talk our doctor into doing a halfway point, PET scan, and that is where I got the call on May 2nd, that God had answered our prayers and that I was already in remission.
Wow.
This was incredible. Obviously, a lot of happy tears this time. You'd think you'd be done with the chemo, but you're not. Still had, I believe, 7 more sessions to go, which was kind of hard. I was like, gosh, if we got it, then why am I having to go back? But you have to finish out your full treatment. And then fast forward, like I said, I ended in the end of July and October. did our final PET scan to confirm remission. And then, which was the best, was the surgery to get the port out.
Yeah.
So, you know, transitioning from that, it's taken time. Your identity shifts a little bit from I'm this healthy, active, played sports business owner to now I'm a cancer patient. Now I'm just supposed to flip a switch back to, normal life. And it doesn't work that way.
Mhm.
There's always some lingering kind of fear in the back of your mind of this coming back. But it was time for me and for Holly we were ready to turn the page. We were ready to move on and get back to where I felt I should have been prior to all this.
How was your faith tested during all this?
Definitely tested, but it's also the prime thing that got me through it all. There was a lot of really cool kind of moments of God being present
Mm.
and getting us through this period. I mean, there's definitely some that stick out. I got baptized during chemotherapy.
Praise God, man.
Praise God, yeah. Kind of a really quick, cool side story about that. So my brother-in-law, he was one that when we found out, he would, in the night we found out in particular, I remember he walked over and put his hands on me, physical touch on my chest and prayed over me. And a lot of people sent prayers. I just remember though the difference of that physical touch
Come
asking
on.
for healing.
Yeah.
But I told Holly after I got that first remission, I said, I'd like to get baptized. And I think I would like, his name is Ryan. I think I would like Ryan to do it. At the time, I couldn't go to church because my immune system was so low that I had to be very, very careful about being in any sort of crowds. I said, I'd like for Ryan to do it at our house with our family here. And I kid you not, Tyler, about 3 days later, I get a text message from him that says, "Hey, man, have you ever thought about getting baptized? I had a vision last night of my baptism followed by your baptism. And if you're interested, I would love to be the one who does it." Kid you not.
Brother,
I
that
mean,
that is
just
that is the Holy Spirit rocking and rolling.
the chills on my arms when I got that text. So we did. We planned. The family came over. We did it in my pool in the backyard and got to be baptized. Holly and I from the very first night of the diagnosis all the way through, and it's something we've continued on. Is we would hold each other and pray out loud
Yeah,
every night, asking
absolutely.
asking for prayer and for healing and for comfort and understanding for our girls. I mean, so the faith, was for sure the thing that got me through it.
Yeah.
I mean, we listened to worship music every time on the way to the hospital.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just countless ways that it would able to, lift my spirit, give me that strength I needed to get through that day.
That's so cool, man. And, for those people listening that may not, be following Jesus or maybe interested in it, I think one thing that's my takeaway already for today, I always try to take away something, and is the power of praying out loud. The devil cannot hear our thoughts. He's not God. He's not able to do that. However, we can absolutely speak truth. We can absolutely speak the enemy away. And I just think the power of prayer out loud is so cool. And talking about Ryan touching your chest and the feeling that you're talking about is like that. I love that. I just love that so much because I know that that's that transfer of God's spirit just running right through your brain, your body, and in your mind, and your spirit's being rejuvenated in that moment. And I'm like, man, that's so cool. I know that feeling, and I get it every once in a while, and it's just, so I kind of want to just end right there because that's so powerful and what an incredible testimony. So let's go through that and as we get close to wrapping this thing up. So you make the decision to allow Christ run the show, essentially, right? Had you been baptized as a child before, or is this? Tell me about that.
No, I had not. I mean, we did go to church growing up. There was some time in my early teenage years where I fell away from God and made that decision to come back when my daughter Addison was born.
Mm,
Um, there were some things I just didn't like about myself, didn't like the way I was living and felt, I needed something better than me. Baptism was that one thing that I had been lingering in the back of my mind, that I just hadn't pulled the trigger on to do that yet. But man, when you're on your knees praying for your life and that prayer is answered, it was a no brainer
yeah.
that God had heard me
Mhm.
and answered my prayers. And it's now it's my turn to
Yeah.
make that public declaration of faith.
But so cool. And incredible. So like when all this happens and you're baptized and you're feeling that rejuvenation of the spirit, like you've gone through this physical transformation backwards. All the while your spiritual transformation and your eternal perspective has changed. What was it like as you started to regain your physical abilities? Were you like, did you shift your faith back to the back burner? Because I think something that, I struggle with, I think a lot of people is like, gosh, we lean on God so heavily when we're going through struggles and pain. And then it's like all of a sudden things are good in life and, genie in the bottle God. What was that time period like?
It was a period of understanding that, I heard this quote pretty early on in my chemo that was, things are gonna happen to you, but you have to understand that they might not be about you.
Mm,
That God might be using your kind of trials and tribulations to help someone else. And when I heard that, I mean that was really big for me, impactful for me to say, okay, I get that I'm going through this right now, but
mhm,
how can I use this? How can I, glorify him by helping someone else? And that kind of transitioned Holly and I into running and raising money for cancer research. Very first week of chemo, Holly came to me and she has a history of running. She ran track and cross country at Sanford and said, Arthur, when we get through all this, I want to run a marathon in your honor. And I'd like to raise money for lymphoma research. And so I said, at the time I needed anything positive to look forward to. I said, okay, but I get to pick where it is.
let's go.
And so I'm online looking at all marathons in North America, and I scroll across Honolulu, Hawaii, and I said, "Okay, Holly, I found where we're doing it." And so that was kind of our light at the end of the tunnel. Was she ran this marathon, and to your question of how did I get kind of physically get back, I told myself I'm going to run the 10K, and this was about 3 months after I finished treatment, and we were going to raise money for lymphoma research, man, and it was so cool to be able to turn this negative into a
Yep.
positive and do this for other people. We ended up raising, I think it's about $13,000 that we
Wow.
sent to the Lymphoma Research Foundation, and that kind of spiraled into the last 2 years us doing additional races and raising money whenever we can in these races for cancer research. So it's been a really cool way
Yeah.
to kind of, like I said, the one thing I couldn't control through it all was my body, my physical,
Right.
so having the chance now to take that back, I was
Mm,
never a runner. That was not my history at all. But it's this mindset shift still of battling through something.
mhm,
I'm going to get my strength back. I'm not going to be denied this.
mm,
And all the while, how can we help others that are going through this,
mm.
same situation?
What did you, as all this ended and you get back to normal life and you're there right now? I know yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before? You had a scan again, right? And I asked you as I was leaving Costco, do you still get the flutters? I think it was the word I used when you go and get these scans 2 years later. What was your response to that?
A little bit,
Mhm.
but not as much. I've worked hard and I've been blessed over the last few years to come a long way since that version of Arthur.
Yeah,
It seems like a lifetime ago, but it was only 2
I
years.
know.
So it's still a mindset thing when I walk in there. I mean, there's certain smells and things that I see that do trigger some of that
Of course.
PTSD almost, but, walking in there, uh, I had a little bit more pep in my step this time.
Yeah.
I know now my faith is a lot
Yeah.
stronger. I'm more prepared to take on things. I know I'm taking care of my physical body. So, walking in there a little bit, and I hope that continues to
Yeah.
kind of wean off over time. But this time I felt pretty good walking in there for the first time.
I love it, man. It makes me so happy. What kind of encouragement could you give to other people that may face a sudden life changing, life altering event?
I think it's really hard in the moment to do it, and I understand that.
Hmm.
But looking back, you can find silver linings. The one thing we can control is our attitude and our mindset. So I think when life throws you this huge curveball, there will be something positive that comes out of it. You might not see it in the thick of it. It might be months, it might be a year or two later. But there are the chance for blessings to happen, and you, like I said, might be blessing someone with how you handle that. And then I think prepare yourself. The Bible says it, that we will face troubles in this lifetime.
Amen.
It doesn't say if, you might, it says we will, right? So prepare your body, your mind, your heart, have your faith, strong. So when these things come along, you're prepared for it.
So, my final question, after hearing all of this and just all the things that you've been through, what is your current definition of success?
I love that you said current because I feel like it's a moving target.
It is.
I think my answer 10 years ago would have been very different, right? Today, as a husband, as a father, my definition of success is much more around my legacy as just a man on this earth. It's kind of that cliche, but I think about it a lot. At my funeral, what would my wife, what would my daughter say about me? What was their dad a good person? Did he help others? Did he try to live life the right way? And like we said, kids are very smart and they're watching all the time, so that shapes a lot of my decisions and my actions is, what would they say about me when I'm gone from this earth? Is it someone they're proud of? And I think that's my definition of success.
That's incredible. And thank you for sharing that. This is my last little segment. So we like to end on a fun note here on this show. And
Let's do
we
it.
do a little rapid fire question and answer section. What was your favorite baseball memory from Sanford?
There was a lot. We did some pretty cool stuff. Our 2012 team set the school record for wins. We won the Southern Conference Championship. We went to a regional, beat a couple top 25 teams. All that stuff was great,
Yeah.
man. But just the time with your teammates.
Yeah.
I mean, the 7-hour bus rides. I was a relief pitcher, so I was in the bullpen the first 2.5 hours of the game. Just you're hanging with your guys. That's the stuff that just the friendships, relationships you made that just kind of live on forever.
I love that. What is your go-to hype song for a workout or before even a game?
So running marathons, I don't have a go-to hype song. I have a go-to hype playlist.
Okay,
How
let's
about that?
go. I love it.
And when you're running 3+ hours, you don't want to be too amped up too quick.
Yeah.
So it's kind of broken in 3 sections. First, start a little bit of upbeat country, some Zach Bryan, Chris Stapleton
Okay.
to kind of, get me going,
There's
but
some
not,
strategy here.
Oh, their strategy.
All right.
Second hours is, the hip hop that we grew up on. That third hour, when I need it, when we need to kind of crank things up a little bit, is some of that headbanging rock that I used to listen to in my teenage years.
Hey, man.
And then about every 5 or 6 songs, I throw a worship song in there.
There you go. Yeah, I think that's amazing.
Just to kind of reset my mind to why am I doing this and for who am I doing it for?
That's incredible. I had a guy on the show that does 100-mile races. I need to ask if he has a scheduled playlist like that. That's incredible. I need to do that for my trips.
There's some strategy there.
We got 2 more questions. Most impactful financial lesson you've ever learned?
This is something that has worked well for Holly and I. It's worked well for a lot of my clients, which is save early and often. Your target, 20, 25% of your income, if you can save that when you start your career out, you're going to be setting yourself up for so much success, be so ahead of the game, right? Where you're taking care of your future self first. And then the other 75% is what you get to enjoy life along the way with, right? I think Warren Buffett has this great quote that's, it's spend after you've saved, not save after you've spent, right? Take care of that thing first and then you can enjoy the rest.
I love it. All right, last question. Do you get a week off, paid vacation, all expenses paid for? You go into the lake, or you go into the beach?
Tyler, I feel like you and I are kind of some of those crazy people where we like to take our kids on trips. And I know you've done this one, so pretty high on our list is to get back to Hawaii with the girls this time.
Okay.
They didn't come with us for the marathon. So yeah, I think if you're cutting the check for me, Tyler, and Strausses are headed to Hawaii.
Let's go, baby. Well, you give me 30% returns and we'll do it.
There you go.
Listen, Arthur, man, I just thank you so much. I honor you for your vulnerability, just the way that you carry yourself and the way that you lead your family and you lead your business. So thank you for coming on the show.
Appreciate it, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for those that are listening still, I want to make sure you know that we will plug all of Arthur's contact information in our show notes. I could not recommend Arthur and his firm enough. They're just incredible people. Go see Arthur. He does not operate only in the state of Alabama. He operates in how many states? 8.
We're about in 28 states
There you
now.
go.
Yeah.
So go see Arthur at Strauss Financial. We'll make sure you have a way to contact him in our show notes. And thanks for listening to the show.
Thanks, Tyler.
That was awesome.